Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to EVE news, we got a first dev blog on the faction warfare changes that CCP is planning to do. I think they are still sounding quite promising. What I personally really like is the extra track that they are planning to do in order to be able to support your faction, but not necessarily take part in the frontline combat. Although, of course, in order to decide like system captures and things like that, you will have to fight off the enemy. There are plans for like propaganda stuff, like propaganda towers that you need to bring online, or stuff to salvage, or to provide materials for your faction. And I love that concept, that you can take part in the rear end of, in the rear, I should say, of the faction warfare action, but still support your faction and help contribute to making victory possible that way. So I think that's a very positive aspect. And then something else that was not mentioned in the dev blog, but on the subreddit, CCP Aurora confirmed it, that the plan is still to allow for supporting your faction through an allegiance system, so without having to leave your corporation and get into a specific faction warfare corporation, which I think is also a huge bonus. It should really reduce the difficulty for people to actually enter, make the decision to enter faction warfare, in my opinion. But CCP Aurora basically said that they're still discussing exactly how they want to implement a system like that, and that's why they can't give out any details, but that's still the plan. So hopefully that does indeed materialize, and yeah, then when we get more details, we'll be able to make a decision on whether or not that's something we want to take part in. In the meantime, for me personally, my moving to Galente space is definitely going apace, and I should be easily ready by the time that they'll be deploying these changes, which will be later this year. That's, well, let's assume that it's going to be later this year. Still, let's give them a little bit of leeway there. If it doesn't happen this year, but it's early next year, that's entirely possible. It's all still in development, of course, but I think we can, assume that it is going to be for this year. And well, they are planning and are already deploying those story type of elements, where people that are probably doing faction warfare right now are receiving some cool storyline things to hunt after, but it's probably still on a pretty low level. So overall, yeah, looking forward to all of that, and we got the confirmation that it's in development and that it is in line with what we expected after FanFest. So I'd say good vibes here from me, and I'm definitely willing to keep my preparation time up, get ready for that, make myself back at home in Galente space, and then hopefully take part of those faction warfare changes. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store here, which, let's see, we get a sale on Divine Foundation skins and Foundation of Faith bundles. So these are, because we are in like Amar celebrations at the moment, haven't really taken part in any events in the last couple of weeks to even months. Yeah, I'm in preparation mode, as I've said, moving most of my activities from Amar space into Galente space. When it comes to the services, that's what's shown right here, 5,500 plex. That's quite a steep price, but all right, there we go, couple of sales if that's what you're interested in. That means that we move on to the market. Let's get going, and a little bit against my expectation, you may have seen it on the ticker already as well, but we'll start with pilot services at 4 minutes. Plex is continuing to go up. So here we go. This is the chart for Plex. Clearly we got another breakout happening at the moment. Look at that, daily averages surging above 4 million, 5-day moving average pulling away from the 20-day moving average on the upside as well. And then you've got that max price that also starts to head towards 4.5 million. Kind of crazy, but I guess that supply is still going down for Plex in general, mostly of course due to the real life changes, that it's become more expensive. Volumes, you can see the real beating that one has received as well, and all of this is of course massively reducing the velocity for ISK in the game yet again. ISK is not trading hands that often at this point, but 1 year high point very pronounced. I thought we would stall once we got over the 4 million, that there would be a little bit of hesitation. You can see here about a week ago how those max prices were stopping to increase here, but yeah, we're actually accelerating at the moment again for Plex prices. So I thought last week was the right time to sell. We're almost at 4.3 million in GDAV4 and buyers forced up above 4.1 million for Plex. A little bit of competition in the Tranquility Trading Tower, but GDA dominating the trading, and yeah, that's it. It's one buyer at 4.1 million, and for only 50, but you can see that everything else is starting to push up towards that 4.1 as well. So everything is above 4 million, very, very expensive, of course. And if you're holding Plex, again, look into whether or not you want to take some profits off the table, but to my surprise, we are adding another leg up for Plex during this summertime. Next up, the multiple pilot train certificates breaking out above 1.75 billion as well. Again, seems like it's stalling, and you actually have some min prices on the downside on this one. It is, of course, a completely different market in very tiny volumes, a very big item price-wise compared to a single Plex, of course. But yeah, almost 1.8 billion for the sellers and almost 1.7 billion for the buyers. I still think it has a catch up to actually what 500 Plex is costing at the moment. It is again a little bit different in how it is used, but it should be relatively equivalent. This still, to me, feels like if you want to train a second character, this is a relatively cheap option compared to your 500 Plex prices at the moment. Then we get skill extractors, obviously following Plex very strongly without, again, that disparity, that upwards pressure from those max prices. It's a little bit less here, but the trend is obviously up as well in the last couple of days. Again, you can also see 5-day moving average pulling up in an even steeper way away from the 20-day moving average. Another 1-year high point well above 450 at this point, 480 million for the sellers, 467 for the buyers. So also super expensive, and I would expect, but we'll see if I'm right or on that this kind of pressure should also translate into upwards pressure for these skill injectors. So here are the large skill injectors, and well, no, I'm actually again being stumped a little bit, but the large skill injectors are plateauing, which to me was another indication. You can see that here last week, and in fact in the last couple of weeks, we're not continuing to go up here. You've got these min prices that were testing 750 million, but were easily able to from time to time even dominate the trading days. And this to me was another indication we might be peaking out, we might be forming a plateau, but then Plex is actually still going up despite large scale injectors basically being stuck between 750 and 800 million ISK. 800 just above that for the sellers, 760 for the buyers. So still expensive, of course, on that 1-year high plateau, but not breaking out despite the fact that Plex is a part and extractors are a part of large scale injectors. So I would have expected a little bit more correlation here, but that's not happening. Small scale injectors have some more volatility, but here again you could say over the last month or so we're basically flat, a little bit above 160, and while in the last couple of days we do have the 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average, it's not as clear a breakout as what we're seeing in Plex and in extractors. 162 million for the sellers and 154 for the buyers. This is a pretty narrow margin here, so maybe a bit of upwards pressure from the buyers is to be seen, but that could also just explain the increased price here, whereas the large scale injectors are basically flat. Finally, we get the daily alpha injectors that are also going up. I think here we do have a little bit of correlation just from real life money related. Plex is going up, you gotta buy that with real life money, so there's the cost, and it is going up in price. Same thing with the daily alpha injectors, and you can see that we are slowly creeping on that 50 million price point, and we are there now for the sellers. 51 for the sellers, still below 45 million for the buyers. That's actually a 10% margin here. That's not that bad. Actually 6 million above 10% margin. That's not that bad. That's actually a pretty high margin. You can see that it's supply that's dropping out, and this is again going to be very, very interesting. This pattern here, we are above 50 million for the sellers. We are drying up in supply. Will CCP come out with a sale to keep this in check? Let's see what they decide to do in the upcoming days and weeks. I don't think that this upwards pressure at the moment is going to relent. And then finally, we've got the hypercores that are also plateauing up at the moment. Right, the last couple of days, you could say 5-day moving average is flat, but it's a little bit all over the place. So a little bit of hesitation, but upwards pressure is clearly here in the pilot services. 430,000 for the sellers, 417 for the buyers. That's completely different from that daily alpha injector. That's a tiny margin for these hypercores, and to me this is an indication that there was maybe a little bit of hesitation in the last couple of days, but that now buyers have gone into the market with ISK, and that they're actually starting that upwards pressure, just like what we're seeing here for Plex, another leg up. So pilot services, extremely expensive. If you're an investor in this type of stuff, this chart should look really good to sell. But of course, last week's it looked really good to sell, and you're early, it's very difficult to time the market. So maybe a little bit of selling and a little bit of keeping your powder dry is what I always recommend, I think, and that's probably the right move still, especially for Plex at the moment. Next up, we've got the mineral market coming in at 11 minutes. Let's take a look at that one. But you may again have seen this on the ticker. Bad news for titanium this week, as we have a bit of reversal of fortune. We managed to make our way above 3.8 ISK half July, and then managed to stay there for a little bit. But now you can clearly see that the trend has reversed. 5-day moving average crossing 20-day moving average. Minimum prices cratering below 3.8, and the average prices are soon to follow. 368 outside of GDA, inside GDA 373 for the first seller, 364 for the buyers. Quite a few sell orders coming in here, competing with each other with 100 million plus. It is basically a little bit too much supply, in my opinion, that's coming in, although 394 is the one where we really see a first big seller of 600 million units. Buyers at 358 buying 500 million units. So there is, in my opinion, still strong demand, but I guess a little bit too many players were taking advantage of the 3.8 price range, and they managed to crash it well below that all of a sudden. The question here is this a start of a problem? Maybe due to summer, maybe due to what's happening in nullsec, where I think things are quieting down a little bit, although there is definitely still some action happening there as well. There's no all-out war, I don't think. It's possible that that is starting to drive down demand, that players feel like they're ready and that they're actually going to wait to see what comes next from CCP. Or is this part of a wavy pattern that's going to start, where you have a natural ebb and flow on these lower prices? I myself would also start to, maybe not sell all of my titanium right away, wait for higher prices, and then when we finally do manage to get those, of course that supply comes online and we go back down. So that's going to be something to look at, I think, for the rest of the month. Because in my opinion, despite the summertime, to see Plex go back up above 3.8, considering the general circumstances of the game, is actually not that bad. I've always, I think, said that to me this still feels like the right time to sell your titanium as well. Don't expect to get a much better price anytime soon. Then we've got pyrite, that's actually managing to hold on quite well, and this is maybe the speculation, but you can start to see the wavy pattern show up here in that pyrite, and slowly edging up from 8.8 ISK on the chart. So we're currently selling at 930, buyers coming in at 905, still a pretty narrow margin, pretty good supplies, right? 50-30 million, quite a lot of this. But we are starting to see 10 ISK come into play as well on the front page, or almost, and yeah, buyers up above 9 ISK does mean that there is demand here for that pyrite. It's not just going to evaporate into nothingness all of a sudden. And then finally for HiSec we've got Mexalon, and that's a pretty big reversal on, of course, over 1 billion units being bought all of a sudden. Could be speculation, could also be a big party that was stocking up on the Mexalon, because that's one of the bottlenecks in nullsec at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. But this had an impact on the price from 60 to 64 for the sellers, and buyers are still at 60. So again, that waviness might just come into play, with buyers not really willing to go above 60 for Mex, but from time to time a big buyer comes in, or a little bit of the supply is held off of the market, which starts to increase the price, which creates an opportunity, which brings back that supply, and there you go, you start another wave in these HiSec minerals. It's entirely possible that that's what's happening, so we'll have to wait and see. Then for low sec, here is Isogen. Oof, that's another really bad chart due to some weird data stuff happening on today's max price, but we are climbing back to 400 ISK, so dropping down to 350, that's not too sustainable. A new supply was not willing to come in here. Look at those max prices though, that went kind of crazy here as well, up to 600 on a day. That seems to be a correct data point, but definitely towards 500 and then drastically declined. And so this is the fact that there are still old supplies out there. That's clearly what's showing up here. For the first time in a very long time, you're able to sell above 450. Quite a few players want to take advantage of that price, and then this is all that supply that's coming in, and that's driving the price back down. Buyers feel confident to go lower, and then eventually, of course, we're too low. Things slow down. Volumes actually went up until that low point, but now volumes go back down, and then prices are starting to rise again. 381 for the sellers, 372 for the buyers, so we still have a ways to go up until the 400 ISK mark, but we are once again being dominated by, well, there's still a 10 million units here, 20 here, 10 million units here. There's still quite a bit of supply waiting at 390 and 380. I'm guessing that some of those supplies on the way down are still waiting to be caught up on the way up, so don't expect us to break straight back towards like a 450 or anything like that. There's still a little bit too much Isogen on the market there, but fresh stuff is probably not coming in all that much, which means that, yeah, 400 for Isogen is coming back into play. Is there a turnaround for Noxium then? Well, not yet, but I do think that we'll start to bottom out here, considering that we have lost quite a bit of value compared to the high point. I was almost at 1500 ISK. We almost lost half the value. 840 pretty much for the sellers, 830 for the buyers. That gap has closed for the first buyer here. We do go down to 805 very quickly, but someone is willing to pay for 500,000 units of Noxium. That's not nothing, and so I think we're going to not go below 750. We're starting to form a bottom here, and then we'll have to again wait and see what happens. I think this one will also depend a little bit on nullsec activity, CCP plans, etc., because the summertime lower activity will have an impact here on what's happening with Noxium as well. For nullsec, I think it's a different story. Yep, they are continuing to build to go from strength to strength price-wise, which is not good news for especially like people that want to produce stuff in high sec, because you're paying those imported costs. But Zydrine is shooting up to 2,500, buyers forced up to 2,000 ISK as well. Very, very high volatility. This does feel like in part there's got to be a little bit of manipulation, some coordination in this, because that's all of a sudden 2.5, and then competition starts to come down from there. You can see all of these sell orders are new, which is part of the course for nullsec minerals, because they are being dominated by the largest group in the games. They have that cartel power. They can basically dictate the price, and you know, I don't know the exact structural reason why Zydrine is shooting up, going to one-year high points, and even to, I think, all-time, not necessarily high points, but definitely a high range for Zydrine at 2.5. It's kind of crazy, but if you know more about what's happening in nullsec and why Zydrine supplies could be you know, in jeopardy, or why there's speculation that higher prices are to be expected in the near future, then let us know, because this is a substantial boom all of a sudden to 2.5, one-year high point, and yeah, we are probably gonna pull back a little bit from this, but it's hard to see something like 1700 come back into play anytime soon, considering the current trend. And then for Megasites, a little bit more muted. This one did shoot up to 1750, compare that to just above 500 ISK about a year ago. Again, that's a very dramatic, sharp rise. We had a little bit of a pullback, what we can expect in the upcoming week or so in Zydrine as well, of course. 2.5 all of a sudden it's probably not going to be sustainable, but you can already see here that very quickly the upwards pressure is right back for Megasite as well, heading back to 1700 for the sellers and well above 1500 for the buyers as well. And then finally for minerals, we get Morphite, nice and flat above 37.5 on the chart. 40k for the sellers, 39k for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin here, showing quite strong demand as well in my opinion. Volumes are down a little bit for Morphite, but way more stable and more affordable, so that doubling of its availability twice, I think it was, for Morphite does mean that things have stabilized a little bit, which is going to also, help keep prices in check for Tech 2. Unfortunately, that's not Tech 1 related or Capital Ship related all that much. Next up, we've got the PI market coming in at 2015. There we go. Let's see what's happening here. As you probably know if you follow EveTalk, my expectation before the summer was that we would have a rough summer, because I always felt like keeping PI supplies up is pretty easy. It's a pretty passive way of generating stuff into the game, but we have been surprised so far by the actual strong prices, especially in the easier to make stuff. So let's get started. Here is broadcast nodes, able to stay above 1.5 million at the tail end. We are starting to drop off there. We are starting to see a little bit of pressure, but we're still above 1.5 million for the sellers and above 1.4 million for the buyers. Still a pretty damn good price at the moment. Then we get construction blocks, and look at that, continuing to stay strong, just below 10,000 disc on average. 9,800 for the sellers, almost 9,000 discs for the buyers. Not a lot of supplies. This is really a bit of a surprise to me personally. If there's one thing that's normally not that difficult to do, is to come online, press your extractors, get started on the cycle of your choice, and then whenever your planners become relatively full, bring them to the market. But no, we're pretty low on supplies, close to 1 year high points for construction blocks, and still holding on quite well. Coolants is actually seeing some upwards pressure in the last couple of days as well, heading for 10k, 9.5, 9.6, 9.7. You can see here 10k coming into play on the front page, and buyers are forced up above 9,000 discs as well. So great price for coolants. This may not look as good again as during the winter when 11, 12k was possible as well. But let's not keep in mind, not forget, I should say, that during the Siege Green update, usage of water has been massively nerfed in the general economy, which is why coolants had to lose a little bit of its range. It just basically brought it in line with almost everything else, 10k being the higher range rather than the lower range that it was for coolants. Enriched uranium staying at 10k as well, 10,120 for the sellers, almost 10,000 for the buyers. Here is that's surprisingly, to me at least, a strong demand. We got good supply. I feel like these numbers are quite doable, but that's probably normal as well when you get a refined PI material that's going for over 10,000 disc. Integrity response drones, building on even more strength. So the biggest winner for that Siege Green update was right here. Integrity response drones shot up to 2.5 million, was able to maintain that up until July. Here a little bit of a pullback. It felt like, maybe we are going to get that difficult summer, but no, people are building big ships it seems, and as a result demand has increased yet again, bringing us to 2.8 million for the sellers and almost 2.7 million for the buyers. So that's just 130,000 discs or something like that in margin between sellers and buyers. That's percentage wise very, very low. So that does again show strong demand. Here are the mechanical parts. That's again data points wise. I think this is just today's min max is always a little bit weird, but on the averages, 10,200 for the sellers, 9,500 for the buyers. Pretty damn good demand, decent supplies, but a great price, and we're still holding on to that. Miniature electronics, 1 year high point, so that's definitely not bad. 13,100 for the sellers, 12.3 for the buyers. Forced up quite a lot as well, so really strong summer that's forming here for PI. Nano factories next, look at that, even last week starting to show volatility, and it's on the upside, breaking straight through 1 million. It was like, when is that going to happen? But if you look at this 1 year chart, 1 million is actually a good price. 950, things like that are still great prices, but now above 1 million for the sellers, 970,000 for the buyers. So a little bit of volatility even showing up in an advanced PI material. organic motor applicators, sort of the same story. Look at that volatility starting to show up, and quite often it is testing the higher range on the 1 year chart. So we went up to 800,000, losing a little bit of ground on that. 735 for the sellers, 700 for the buyers. I think here again, seeing a little bit of volatility, higher prices does all of a sudden materialize some old reserves, some speculators willing to take some profits at that point. But the fact that it's in the middle of the summer and we're seeing these price spikes on the upside does show that there is actually strong demand here. Recursive computing modules, we always have some exceptions, of course, just below 900k, 800k. On the 1 year chart, this is not a great price, but it's not cratering to 1 year low point just yet either. Then we get our robotics. Now building up above 75k, that's pretty damn impressive. 75,000, well, a little bit of supply coming in here below that, but you can see here 77 coming into play. So there is definitely enough supply, but demand, look at that, buyers above 70,000 disc, right? This is way below 10% between sellers and buyers. That, in my opinion, again, in PI shows pretty damn strong demand. People are willing to pay the price for the robotics, and for some reason supply is not able to really follow, or let alone completely flood the market. Then we get rocket fuel, also continuing to build on strength. 1 year high point here, 13,400 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. This would be one of those that maybe at some point you've speculated on rocket fuel going up in price and bought below 10,000 disc, for instance, in the last half year, or if before that at even lower prices, you're looking at some pretty nice profitable prices. Self-harmonizing power cores, able to plateau above 2 million, stays pretty impressive. 2.1 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers. Then we get our smart fab units. I think this one is one of our exceptions as well. You can see that it is basically not needed enough to have a more consistent price and have that high price range due to the relatively high demand in the economy at the moment. And so you get this more volatility being all over the place, 63k to 41k. Then you get a big margin here between sellers and buyers all of a sudden. So this is one of those that's not doing too well. Everything else so far really strong. Sterile conduits also not that hot. A million would have been a nice price. We are at 900k for the sellers, 800k for the buyers. Normal margin, so this is more in line with what you would expect in a normally supplied market. Then we get supercomputers. They are doing not that great either, but still above 70k for the sellers, 65k for the buyers. Margin wise, that's pretty good, but again, the volumes are, I think, the problem here for supercomputers as well. Synthetic oil did really well up until June, went above 10k. It's losing some ground on that one and is back in a more normal average range. 8k for the sellers, 6-7 for the buyers. So it's not uniform across the entire PI market, but the general vibe is still demand is strong. So I do think that we can stop the descent here, and if all of the others here are an indication, getting back above 8k would be pretty damn good for synthetic oil and would be a sign that demand is there. Synthetic synapses staying above 90k, 92 to 88k. Look at that narrow margin there yet again. Transcranial superconductors also plateauing at 84,000 for the sellers, 72,000 for the buyers. A bit more margin here that has started to open up as well. It is still possible, of course, that in the late summer things will break down a little bit on the demand side, and perhaps some of these are starting to show that. But still, the general performance for PI, in my opinion, has been pretty strong. Water cooled CPU, right? We know that this one is like the worst in the bunch that we check every week. Below 5,000 disc at 4.5 for the sellers, 4,000 disc for the buyers. Again, pretty small volumes, not all too consistent. I guess it's just not that needed. And then we've got another winner all of a sudden. Wetware mainframes trying to get back to a 1 year high point all of a sudden at 1.8 million for the sellers, 1.6 for the buyers. So it's, I think, a little bit of buying that happened. Buyers are a little bit more patient here. It's going to be interesting to see if we get a drastic pullback well below 175, or if we can maintain some of these gains here for Wetware mainframes. But in general, I'm really impressed with PI prices, and from that perspective, right, if you're looking at make PI at least somewhat valuable, the siege ruin update and the changes to like large ship construction, I think will have been a good change that CCP has done here. So pretty damn impressive, and I'm still in selling mode obviously for PI, although one of my next moves is going to be to move my PI setup from Amar space into Galente space. Next up, advanced moon materials, 30 minutes. I am going to quickly drink before that though. There we go. Let's see what's happening here. While we had a strong PI summer so far, that was a little bit of a surprise. When it comes to Tech 2, we've seen that we have been in a lot of trouble. Doubling the availability from moons, they are being mined quite heavily, has meant really low prices. Let's start as always with the carbides. Here is crystalline carbonite waving its way back to 100 ISK, which is really not a great price on the 1 year chart. 102 for the sellers, 94 for the buyers. So I think here a little bit of buying on the prices well below under disc, a little bit of investment money coming into that, but I don't see this as a structural change or anything like that. And the warning is that this could still again not be the end. While people have been buying these dips, I think that they can test new lows if things stay the way they are now, especially in nullsec, which is, I would say, relatively quiet, and the moon mining operations don't seem to be a priority for anyone to disrupt. So yeah, low prices, but potentially I think even lower prices. Let's see if Caldari next can maintain its premium. Yeah, it's doing pretty well here actually, staying above 125, 142 for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. So the Caldari premium is still a thing. Then for Minmatar, its Fernite Carbide made its way slowly back above 100 ISK. Start to see a little bit of spread between sellers and buyers on this one. 103 to 89, look at that big difference. That again to me shows that, yeah, it's not a given that we're gonna stay above 100 ISK all of a sudden, or that we're not going to test new lows, because demand is very volatile. I think a lot of the demand is speculative rather than structural. And then finally we get tungsten carbide for Amar that made its way back above 125. Do have a little bit of a change here, 135 for the sellers, 117 for the buyers. But again, you know, does this mean that we have formed a bottom, that we are not going to test 100 again? That's the real question. We'll see. This again feels like big volumes all of a sudden to bring us from 100 to 125. And is this extra demand? I don't see where it would be coming from, so I'm gonna say that this is speculative money and making its way into the market. Could even be that they're gambling on CCP eventually changing something to make Tech 2 more expensive again. Then this would of course be an interesting time to invest in all of this stuff. Which to me would sort of make sense, right? Compared to faction ships, compared to Tech 3 ships. I mean, they're so inexpensive at the moment. If this remains up until the Alliance tournament, it's going to be interesting to see what the meta will look like. Next up, we've got our meta materials. So for Galente, it is photonic metamaterials. Yeah, still flat. In my opinion, a sign that that extra demand is speculative rather than something that's needed. Below 7,500 for the sellers, just above 7,000 for the buyers. Non-linear metamaterials for Caldari. Breaking down and again testing the 1 year low point, now well below 12.5 at 11.5 for the sellers and below 11,000 is for the buyers. Again, another dip. Your choice of course, but if you're one of those dip buyers, this will probably look pretty juicy. Able to buy non-linear metamaterials below 11,000 ISK on this 1 year chart is of course pretty damn good. Then we've got Minmatar, which is for plasmonic metamaterials, flat above 12.5, 13,400 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. To me, this is more of a bit of a warning that things are still not like fixed or anything like that in these advanced moon materials. because here Caldari lost its premium to the Minmatar metamaterials. So that's definitely a bit of a reversal here. And then finally for Amar, it's terahertz metamaterials that are staying below 10,000 discs, slowly creeping back towards it. 9.9 for the sellers, 9.3 for the buyers, a bit more demand maybe coming in as well. But yeah, again, keep in mind, we are buying below 10,000 discs for terahertz metamaterials, which is probably, historically speaking, a pretty good point. But is this going to be the actual bottom? That's difficult to say. For the other advanced materials, we're not expecting good news, of course. We had a little bit of a reversal a couple of weeks ago, where quite a few of them were trying to get away from the bottom. But here, for instance, fermionic condensates now below 40k, lowest range of the year, 39.4 for the sellers, 34,000 for the buyers. Another warning sign to me that all of this could still not be over in the other in the previous part of the segment. Then we get ferrogel that last week went back below 20,000 discs, managed to make its way back above that, 21,450, 20,000 for the buyers, but that's still not a great place to be. I think Fullerites, right, this was one of those that are reforming a bottom, but I do think I mentioned that my expectation is that players will see 600-700 discs for Fullerites. We haven't been able to sell at that price in a long time, and they're just gonna crush it. And here it is, we're just heading back for 400 disc, 450 to 440 for the seller, so we're back at the low end of the range in no time, right? That as well, very, very difficult to take advantage of these premiums. So if you're trying to sell, I would say do so in small volumes once you can take profits, because once you spook the market, it's just gonna be stuck. Hypersynaptic fibers still slowly edging down towards 5k on this one, not much to say. Nano transistors, right, again, right, couple of weeks ago made its way back to 3000 disc, but the pressure is building. Look at the last couple of days of averages, 2.7 to 2.6 for the buyers. Then we get phenolic composites, this one also, right, doing first little jump here, another jump a couple of weeks ago, and then look at those minimum prices going straight down the drain, 1,050 to 870. Yeah, this is going to be another one of those, just like with the Fullerites, that's all of a sudden going to fall right back off a cliff towards the low end of the range. Then we get pressurized oxidizers, so relatively new item, making its way back to 10,000. It's over a year old, but it's definitely way newer than everything else in here. 10,500 for the sellers, but look at those buyers, they're just not budging. 7,650, that's a 3,000 disc pretty much margin, 30% between sellers and buyers. So this upswing here, I think by speculators, and I think now the sellers that have bought in the last month or so are already gonna start to show up. That's my expectation. Reinforced carbon fiber flat at the lowest range here, 6,600 to 6.3 pretty much. And then finally ceramic fibers, also again, right, last week we started that. Yeah, we are trying to pull away from things, and now we're back on that. Look at that gap closing between 5-day and 20-day moving averages. Might not fall off a cliff on this one, but clearly any higher prices are getting plugged very quickly and are not too sustainable at the moment. Advanced moon materials in general super under pressure. Tech 2 ships then, let's see if there's opportunities for stuff here. 38 minutes. Like that, and let's go. So Basilisk, yeah, 1 year low point below 130 million. That's a place where I think you can definitely try to jump in. 120 million below that for the sellers, and below 110 million for the buyers. We're on the downside. Look at those minimum prices. I think right now, if you try, you can probably buy a Basilisk below 110 million. Lowest point pretty much for the entire year. And you know, if you could grab one of those, I think later down the line you are going to be able to sell that. 30-40% profit should not be too much of a problem. Then we've got the Cerberus, same story, dropping off all of a sudden after doing a double top here at 180. We're currently selling for 132. Buyers at 120. Look at the amount of buyers. They've just completely evaporated. That's another one that, yeah, if you're looking for risking a trade, because same warning as with advanced moon materials, right? This could not be the bottoms. You can see here We test 130 and it looks like this is able to hold. It's been able to hold on for the last 4 or 5 months, but that's no guarantee because we are in this strange spot for EVE Online at the moment. I do feel like there's quite a bit of hesitation in the player base as well to invest a lot into the game at the moment, and a little bit of dumping can easily test these lows yet again. So be a little bit careful again, right? Don't buy 20 Cerberus or all of a sudden or anything like that, but 1, 2, to me that makes a lot of sense on a chart like this. Then we get the curse, made its way back to 150, pressure is right back, so that's the nice wavy pattern, and here you can start to see those lower bottoms. You never know how low this stuff can go. 135 to 130, I'd call this, yeah, like a little bit high basically. I would wait, and if I want to buy a curse, I'd wait for a better price. Damnation, super flat at the current range, buyers below 250. So 258 to 242, same story, right? There's not enough buyers in here. I wouldn't want to speculate on this one because unloading is gonna be not too easy, but I would definitely buy one if I hadn't a couple of damnations already, right? If you're interested in eventually looking at the ship, flying it, giving it something to do, then buying one right now is really the best time. You're buying one below 250 million. Last year, we started off paying practically double that price. So yeah, another one here. If you're looking at that command ship, I wouldn't do so speculatively, right? Those Caldari ships, that feels a little bit more interesting. They tend to have a premium, super pronounced 1-year low point. But something like a Damnation, 10 a day or so are being traded. A lot harder, I think, to be able to do an active trade in there. But once you have something like, I might actually fly that, then I think it is the right time to buy. Next up here we get the Deacon, a little bit too stable, but we're still buying probably below 15 million. Yeah, 17 million to 15 million. Availability should still be okay, so very stable. Same story, right? You think that there's a place for a Deacon logistics ship eventually, something that you're gonna do in EVE. Definitely grab one at this point, I would say. Then we get the Eagle, another Caldari one that's dropping off. Let's see where we are for the buyers. 120 for the sellers almost, and then 115 for the buyers. That's not a very large margin, but still buying below 120. Let's see if I can get the 120 to show on the chart. That's right here. It's not bad, right? You've got an exceptional dump below 120 that happened here in late April, but other than that, you're buying actually Eagles at the lowest price possible, and it's even the sellers that are going below 120 here. So you know, same story. I'd say, yeah, if you're looking to speculate on an Eagle or on a Caldari ship, this is actually trade worthy in my opinion, not just for people that want to fly it. Then the EOS, right, showing that you know, that mindset I do think is important, especially for those ships that are not traded that often, because I bought mine at like 254 and I'm super happy. I'm still super happy, but of course looking back now, 243 for the sellers, 204 for the buyers. I could have probably bought an EOS for less than 210. That's another 40-ish million that's you could say wasted, or that's my impatience caused this one, but you never know when this situation ends, and when CCP does decide that, yeah, an EOS for 200 million ISK, compare that to like Tech 3 ships, compare that to faction ships, just kind of crazy. I love the EOS myself, 5 large drones, really awesome. Might actually buy a second one for another base of operations or something like that. But yeah, 1-year low points for the EOS, super cheap, and this is that same warning for your advanced movement heroes, right? If you're looking to trade, and here I think we could say that this is hopefully, I would say, a large alliance or something like that that bought to actually fly them. But if someone here went in and bought 100 of them for speculation, or a couple of people went in and bought 100 of them for speculation, bringing up to 300 million, they're all looking at losses right now. So it's very, very dangerous. Keep your volumes down, people. Don't spook the market too much. We're still looking for those bargains, and this is the time to really be just snagging the very best of it. Eris 37 to 31 million, super close to 1 year low point. Not enough volume, I would even say, for volatility wise. Same story, right? You want to have one, you want to be able to fly one. This is the time to look into it. Another Caldari one, the Flycatcher, that's dropping off to 40 million, 41.5 to below 40 million for the buyers. You're buying a Flycatcher for 40 million. I have a couple, I think, already, 1 or 2 at least, and I love it for PvE as well. And I feel like this is also one of those, there are events that CCP does that is like Destroyer limited, and then this is one of your best PvE options out there. Massive shield, lots of launchers, really super strong for very specific events. Then we get the Guardian, which is still floating around the 130 mark, 125 in fact for the sellers, below 120 for the buyers. Same story as the last couple of weeks. You want to buy one of these, definitely go ahead, even for speculation in my opinion. On a little bit of analytic action, Guardian replacements tend to be par for the course. Heretic, not at a 1 year low point just yet, but definitely seeing some pressure yet again this week, so that's not a place you want to jump in, I don't think. Then we get the Hound. That was pretty good here, right? Below 15 million, above 20. We're dropping off quite sharply. So sellers are down to 16.5 and buyers are down to 15 million. Should we have a little bit of patience and wait for this 20 to be gone or something like that? Yeah, that's 70 days. Not sure if that's going to happen. Would love to have the jump in be below 15 million again. That's like a no-brainer. You can see that that's trade worthy here. We're very close. Your decision, buy just above 15 million. Try to make a trade out of it. Stealth Bomber, almost 100 a day. Far lower range. A couple of trades on this one to me makes a lot of sense. Ikitursa going back below 500 million. Yeah, 490 for the sellers, 450 for the buyers. Ishtar below 130, super close to 1 year low point, I think. Yeah, 129 to below 120. Same story, right? 120 million for an Ishtar. 5 heavy drones, 5 sentry drones, whatever you want, super volatile. Take 2 armor, take 2 resistances. Jesus Christ, that's really cheap, and compared to the Tech 1, again, compared to the faction stuff, I don't think CCP is going to keep this situation along forever. It could take him a long time to actually decide to do something though, because I do think that the first changes to industry in Tech 1, right, the increased complexity, they had a very good purpose, right? Give us levers so that we can you know, manipulate things to make certain things more available, less available, without necessarily impacting the whole broader market. Quite understandable, but I do think that they're a little bit spooked. They have been a little bit spooked by how sharp the drop-off was all of a sudden due to the increased complexity, and then Tech 2 is already way more complex, so if you're gonna touch that, I do think that they're a little bit scared of that. They don't want to mess too much with it, but this could just be a little bit too much of a good thing as well. So if people are saying where is prosperity, right, in general, I would say look at the Tech 2 ship prices. That's crazy availability. This is definitely one of those things that has become like super affordable all of a sudden. Then we've got the Kirin, that's back down below 20 million. Volume-wise, not that great, 17 million to 16 million. All right, maybe not just yet. Manticore looks really interesting again, right? Several jumping points, a little bit above 15 million. I think on average prices we're going to be close to 1 year low point again. And then that's below 17 million for the sellers, just above 16 million for the buyers. So you're buying below 17 million no matter what, and here was your spike up to 25 million, where basically so many people were happy that they could finally sell above 20 million that they crashed the market right back down. That's the volatility that we do love though. Manticore, Stealth Bomber, definitely useful for large and smaller groups. There is demand here. Yeah, that would actually be Basilisk, Cerberus, Manticore, lots of jumping points even for people that want to speculate. Nemesis doing the same thing here. Unfortunately, it looks like we're a little bit late, 14 million to 13 million. So you can still try to buy a very cheap one if you want to, but it's going to become harder and harder. As you can see here, we're already turning the corner as well, starting to go back up on the average prices. The Nighthawk still below 300 million. Yeah, same story. You want to fly one, buy one right now. Otherwise, speculatively, 20, 15 a day, that's not enough in my book. Oneros touching 100 million again, 102 for the sellers, 95 million for the buyers. Again, volume-wise, the Oneros is not that great. Still, you're buying a logistics cruiser for less than 100 million, especially if you fly these things. Definitely take a look. Purifier, 1 year low point, touching 15 million. Below 15 for the sellers, 13 million for the buyers. That's another one. If you're looking to speculate on Tech 2, this is the chart you want to see. This is Stealth Bomber as well. Easily 100 a day. That's trade volume that you can work with. 4, 5 of them. I'd say, yeah, maybe even a couple more at 15 million. 100 million or so in purifiers should be absorbable by this market. So definitely, yeah, a couple of stealth bombers looking pretty juicy as well. The Rook staying at 150. That's no man's land to me. Not exactly the place I would want to be. Saber, 40 million. Yeah, another one. You want to buy it, do it to use it. But speculation-wise, that's a no for me. Scalpel, buyers are 12 million. No supply, but also no volumes. So I wouldn't be touching that. Scimitar going back below 130, 126 to below 120. That's another option. We've been lower though. Be careful here, but you are buying a Scimitar below 120. Spike here is at 150. Could be a small trade in that. Sleipnir, a little bit too flat at the low end. Same story, right? Command ship. You want to buy one below 240 million. Definitely go ahead. Then the Vagabond making its way back to 150, but still definitely pretty damn cheap. And then the Zarmast also going back towards the low end of the range. So not a good week for producers and sellers of Tech 2 ships. Looks like they crashed most markets on this one. And for people that want to speculate and I want to trade though, again, be careful. This could not be the bottom. But I am seeing a lot of really juicy targets, especially in some Caldari ships and some stealth bombers that do have enough volatility. A couple of logistics cruisers as well that do tend to have the volumes to create some volatility and to provide you with a sell opportunity later down the line. Next up, Tech 3 ships at 51.30. Let's go. Like that. Gonna be a bit of a different story, but let's again try to keep some of these options in mind, right? Logistics cruiser, 100 million ISK. Ishtar, 120 million ISK. Here is the Confessor chart, staying at 53 million, 48 million for the buyers. Supply wise, not that much coming in. On the 1 year chart, basically at the high end of the range, but yeah, that's the consequence of the gas changes that are being absorbed by faction stuff at the moment. So this still feels like, yeah, 2 Confessors, 1 logistics cruiser. Not that difficult math to make in my opinion. They're just too expensive compared to what Tech 2 is offering at the moment, in my opinion. Hecate continuing to drop a little bit as well, 55 million to below 50 million for the buyers. That's a pretty damn sharp drop off, lowest price we've seen in quite a while. If you absolutely must speculate in something in Tech 3, this could be okay to do. Try and grab a Hecate below 50 million. Should still be possible. We are clearly at the start of this sudden drop off in demand, and I think that the higher prices are here to stay though. Higher averages, 55 million should be pretty damn easy. 10% you can practically try a trade with that, hope for a bit of a breakout or something like that. Then we've got the Jackdaw also seeing some pressure, and you can see here the spread for the minimum price is going down below 50. So 56 million to 49 million. Or is it 49.9? No, 49 million. So you can buy one below 50 million. But still, I feel like this is very expensive for the hull you are buying. And then finally, we've got the Zwepel that's also seeing some pressure at the moment. 45 million to 41.5 million. I did read somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where it was anymore, that gas huffing has gone up a lot because it's so valuable compared to before, and so that maybe this is putting a little bit of pressure on the price just in general for Tech Tree destroyers, but also for the faction ships, and that's what's being translated here. So could be that availability is becoming a little bit better on all of this, but still volumes are so low, and in my opinion, yeah, I'd look for Tech 2 options rather than Tech 3 at the moment. Then we've got the cruisers that did feel like they have a nice wavy pattern and could be trade worthy. Last week it seems that minimum prices went below 150 for the Legion. We're at 180, 179 for the sellers and 165 for the buyers. So we're starting to recover from this a little bit. But if you want to buy a Legion right now and then hope to sell it, I think last week was the easier time you were going to get to trigger one of your buy orders, because we were on the downswing. Right? Should have basically, if last week you put up a price order, a buy order that was like 160, maybe even playing a little bit below that, you were gonna get that triggered 4 or 5 days ago. You want to try and do that now, you're just not gonna grab it. So this is what I do mention quite often, is that if you're looking to buy something, look for the downward trend to only just start on those minimum prices, because once that bottoms out, it's too late basically. And that's exactly what happened here. So last week, great buy opportunity for the Legion. This week, you're probably a little bit too late. Then we get to Loki. Still seeing some pressure on this one. It's hesitating at that 180 mark. 189 for the sellers, and below that 176 for the buyers. Still buying a Loki below 180, which for me on this chart is a reasonable jumping point. And we're not starting to shoot up here on the minimum prices, although we're started again. So probably same story last week, right time to put up your Loki buy order. This week probably too late. And then we've got the Proteus next. That's finally showing that pressure is going below 180. So sellers are at 185, buyers are at 167. Yeah, this is last week for the previous two here. This is a time where you can try to get an aggressive buy order. With a little bit of luck, you get something that happens right here, like with the Legion. It triggers, you get your cheap Proteus, you're ready for your trade. And then we've got the Tengu finally. That's also over, right? Last week we saw that pressure, got a couple days where we went close to 160 million, at 181 to 168, and it's probably only going to go up. Those buy orders will have to go up in order to be triggered on this recovery from, well, really low prices all of a sudden, 1 year low minima last week. So unfortunately, if you're looking for that Tech Tree speculation, for the cruisers, you're probably too late. Last week was the time to jump in on this stuff. And then we still have an extra product for the week, which I'm choosing the faction cruisers, coming in at 5650. The reason I'm sticking with faction ships is because I actually forgot to mention that right at the start of the video. But part of what they're trying to do in faction warfare is also to make sites that will be limited to Tech 1 and Navy faction. So not even pirate faction as well. So my thinking is cruisers should be relatively average, doable, even despite current prices. Definitely more doable than battleships. So it's going to be interesting to see if there is an impact on those Navy cruisers due to the announcement that happened here. So let's go to those cruisers. Faction cruisers. We'll start with pirate faction, but I think we all know to expect expensive prices here. So here is an Ashimu, 164 million to 142 million for the buyers. So pretty damn expensive. On the chart, it's not at the top, but still well above average. And again, if we then keep that Tech 2 Ishtar in mind for 120 million, this is a very bad value proposition in my opinion, and it's reflected in the volumes, less than 10 a day. Pretty damn bad. Then we've got the Cinnaball that's going for 250 million. It's 240 for the sellers, 209 for the buyers. Pretty damn big spread. About 10 a day again in the last couple of days on a slight uptick in price. So once we are above 200 million for average, yeah, people just are not interested in the Cinnaball anymore. Who can blame them? Ortras 350, again not 1 year high point, but yeah, 350 for an Ortras when you get like a Tech 2 ship that has better resistances, can also have shields, right? We're talking about the one that we're speculating on this week if we want. Let's take week comparison, 355. I honestly think it's fair to say that Ortras might have a slight edge on the Cerberus, but with the resistance and things like that, a 120 million Cerberus is, in my opinion, pretty much an equivalent platform to a 350 million is Ortras. So that's it's just the cost, right? It's mostly the gas probably, but and the problems, BPCs and all of that stuff, of course. It's just production cost that's making them so expensive, which is why, for me, speculatively, on the long run, I don't think CCP is going to maintain this this situation and Tech 2 is gonna then take the beating, I think. And then we get the Phantasm next, going for 230, 1 year low point. That's definitely interesting, 230 to 220. So this could be due to activity in certain region of nullsec that's stabilizing, and that's quite high, increasing availability. But that's nice if you want to fly a Phantasm. Again, why would you want to fly a Phantasm when you can get a Tech 2 cruiser for half the price? Stratios 300 million, also decently available on this 1 year chart. You're buying below 300 million. This one I can actually understand, right? Covered ups, capable, get specific bonuses for exploration. I could understand why you're still willing to pay that premium for the Stratios, but I think if you followed my videos, especially on exploration, in my opinion, a Stratios is even better because of its drone capability. You can get sentries on there. It doesn't have covered ups. Yep, that's true, but you can still get an all-in-one fit there. You can easily hack everything as well with the Ishtar. So yeah, they're just super expensive. Gila, the king of PvE, does have an amazing tank capability with missiles. But yeah, 270 for this, 120 for a Tech 2 cruiser. Again, the gain in capability, the Gila is probably slightly better, but it's probably not worth it. And then finally we get the Vigilant, that's also decently low, 277 to 252, which is sort of confirming the theory that yeah, the gas economy is starting to take shape, is starting to become a little bit stronger, which is why we're seeing lower prices in these faction pirate ships and in the tactical destroyers this week. Gonna be interesting to see if we get a counter move on the Navy faction. Stormbringer should be an exception. That one is actually pretty low and still pretty expensive, of course, 215 million to 198. The reason is this is Edencom. This is not the regular factions that we expect to see revamped first for faction warfare. So maybe you can use a Stormbringer in those sites. It's not even that strong in PvE. Let's take a look at the Augur Navy issue. We do have a little bit of a volume impact on potentially the announcement there. I think a couple of days here we were super low at 50 million. We went up to 70 again, and we're at 70 million for the sellers, 51 for the buyers. So here that could be speculative volumes. Actually, volumes are on the downside of things. Weird. Let's see if we'll probably need a little bit more time to see if there is an actual impact. Maybe the Caracal can tell us more. That should have better volumes. Why was that increased? Not sure. Availability is quite okay. 57 to 50 million. Feels like it's actually a pretty cheap Caracal Navy issue at the moment. Executor Navy issue, then the opposite side. Galente pretty expensive. 100 million to 72 million. I'm actually gonna take, and it was the Augur, right? No, that's a Mar. Where is the other? Vexor Navy issue is the other one. Was expensive, starting to come down a little bit. Still, we are talking 87 million for the sellers, 80 million for the buyers. So Galente, pretty expensive. Caracal Navy issue, interestingly inexpensive. And then what is the other one? Osprey Navy issue, look at that as well, selling for 56, buying below 50 million ISK. If you want to be ready, right, so the speculation here might be that this is an opportunity. We do have, right, that faction Caldari is probably winning, getting lots of LP, which means cheaper ships. Galente not doing that well, of course. They're the other side for Caldari, and so those ships are expensive. and you do have, if the tide turns, right, you can expect that to change. And so if you invest now in Caldari ships and then sell when they are losing, that is potentially a very good trade to do. But I would say that you have a double incentive to look into this, because of course with the faction warfare changes, there will be sites where the Osprey Navy issue is the ship to fly, where the Caracal Navy issue is the ship to fly, because it's only those ships and Tech 1 that'll get in there. And so if you want to be ready for this, even maybe as a Galente pilot like myself, I would be looking on stocking up on some Osprey Navy issue and Caracal Navy issue at the moment. Not sure if they'll punish us for flying the opposite faction, but these are amazing PvE ships as well, by the way. Shields, missiles, my love, my go-to combination. Of course, do these have 5 small drones as well? So this one does not have small drones, I don't think. Oh no, it does. Look at that, 5 small drones, and I think the Osprey does as well. Yeah, 5 small drones. So these are 2 dream ships for me as well, and they're below 50 million. They're actually relatively cheap still, because probably of the LP availability. I'm gonna write this down now. Navy issue Caldari. And I'm probably going to buy a couple of these. Then we'll do the same story here. Is Augur Navy issue again. I would say it feels decently expensive, going at 70 million. And then the other one is the Omen Navy issue, 60 million. That's actually an in-between spot and showing some pressure from about a month ago. Let's see what then the Minmatar are doing. Here is the site going above 50 million. 58 to 53, and then the Stabber Fleet issue also a little bit below average, but doing okay. So a little bit less of the clear story here between Amarr and Minmatar. Maybe they have a faction warfare situation where there's no clear winner at the moment, and that means that I'd say Minmatar is slightly cheaper than Amarr, is what it feels like to me here. So they're slightly more expensive. If you're looking to buy, I'd say the jumping point is clear. It is the Caldari ships. And yeah, again, the reason I'm taking a look at this is because I'm pretty interested in what CCP is going to do for faction warfare. And yeah, Navy faction ships, so not just all faction ships, but Navy faction ships could really become the niche for certain parts of faction warfare, and speculating on that right now to me feels like something you could really do, especially if you're planning to potentially take part in that activity as well. And so yeah, and I love these 2 ships. Caracal Navy issue and Osprey Navy issue are absolutely amazing ships to fly as well. So there we go. Very happy that I took a look at that, because it's giving me some ideas. In general, I would say there is a little bit of pressure on the gas-related faction prizes and Tech 3 destroyer prizes, which is good news for availability. But still, availability is all about Tech 2 at the moment though. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.